The industry of fashion is one that is teeming with tales of competition, comparison, and even lifelong feuds. When it comes to the various sectors of the arts, it can be difficult to not draw comparison between artists' works. Fashion, style, and taste are all completely subjective, and as such warrant differences of opinion. What one person may claim to be a masterpiece, another will deem a failure. But in that lies the beauty of clothes. They are individual, an expression of personal style and preference. It's no secret that if asked who my favourite designer is, I will, without hesitation, say Hubert de Givenchy. There is something about his aesthetic, the combination of simplicity and whimsy that for me is just perfect. If you're familiar with any of my other videos, you will see that I've made an effort to express why I see genius in his work. Understandably, there are some who disagree with my point of view, people who don't understand my preference for his body of work, and that's okay. I'm not here to tell people what to like or not to like, because with something as idiosyncratic as fashion, no one's word is law. But I have noticed a very common response that I wanted to address. The Balenciaga versus Givenchy debate. It's a comparison that is not uncommon where Givenchy is concerned. I will frequently be told to forget Givenchy and turn to Balenciaga instead. Givenchy was no genius. He created nice designs but nothing memorable. Balenciaga, on the other hand, was the master, the one true couturier. Without him, Givenchy would have been nothing. They're suggestions which are said with good intentions, I'm sure, but the pitching of these two designers against one another feels wholly unnecessary. That's not to say that these opinions are wrong, or that people shouldn't prefer Balenciaga to Givenchy. Quite the opposite. I want to encourage others to establish their own personal favourites, but having a favourite doesn't warrant demeaning other artists or other people's preferences. So where has this particular comparison stemmed from? For context, Balenciaga and Givenchy were both fashion designers in the epicenter of mid-20th century Parisian couture. Balenciaga established his own fashion house in Paris in 1937, and from that point was considered one of the greatest designers in power. He was known for his bold design, his unique silhouettes, and his impeccably architectural cuts. Givenchy established his own fashion house in 1952 and was immediately heralded in as the freshest up-and-coming designer on the scene. He was known for his youthful and elegant designs, his use of beautiful textiles, and flawless tailoring. So why the comparison? Well, that partly comes from the fact that Balenciaga was generally considered both then and now to be one of the greatest couturiers of the time. Christian Dior labelled him the master of us all. Coco Chanel said he was the only couturier in the truest sense of the word. He was considered a pioneer in the realm of design and was loved and admired worldwide. Perhaps no one would have been quicker to agree with these sentiments than Hubert de Givenchy himself. For Hubert, Balenciaga was his inspiration. As a young man, he followed his work religiously, saying, "There's Balenciaga and the good Lord." When Givenchy was just 17 and eager to pursue a career in fashion, he took a train to Paris, sketches in hand. Hoping to work for his idol, he walked straight into the house of Balenciaga to ask if he could meet the man himself, only to be told, "Balenciaga sees no one." It wouldn't be until 1953, after Hubert had already established his own fashion house, that the two would meet. It was at this point that they established a close working friendship. Balenciaga took the young designer under his wing, and the two often exchanged ideas and design concepts. As a result, there's a continual thread between their work that followed. They both championed styles like the baby doll dress and the sack dress. In the press, their collections were often discussed in tandem. Although I can recognise the differences in their style, there is an undeniable similarity between their aesthetics that came as a result of their collaborative friendship. Ever since then, the two have been compared and contrasted, and the Balenciaga versus Givenchy debate established itself. But I find it to be a somewhat flawed perspective. It's undeniable that Hubert was hugely inspired by Cristóbal, but inspiration is often an important, if not essential, aspect of design. As long as it cannot be branded as plagiarism, which was never the case between these two designers, an artist shouldn't be discredited for being inspired by others. Even Balenciaga himself, the pioneer, the inventor, the master of us all, took ideas from other designers. In his early career, before moving to Paris, Cristóbal would purchase and copy French couture for his Spanish clients, studying the work of couturiers and replicating their construction techniques. Here is a Lanvin design from 1928, and here is a Balenciaga copy from the same year. Again, here is a Lanvin design, and here is a Balenciaga creation for a Spanish client. Perhaps his biggest inspiration of all was Madeleine Vionnet. Known for her groundbreaking skills in cut and construction, Vionnet was a forerunner in the use of bias-cut fabrics, synonymous with the 1920s and 30s. It is said that Balenciaga would often come away from Paris with a few pieces from Vionnet's shows, which he would study, copy for clients, or use as inspiration for his designs. The two probably met in San Sebastian in 1920, and Vionnet became a friend to the young Cristóbal. According to author Mary Bloom, she encouraged him to create. The two remained close until her death in 1975, and even when old and bedridden, Vionnet created miniature toiles of designs that she offered to Balenciaga with the wish that they might be useful to him. Vionnet was the generation above Balenciaga, and offered a kind of mentorship that was not too dissimilar to the guidance he would go on to give Hubert. In this respect, these two timelines are very similar. Balenciaga met Vionnet in his early career, Givenchy met Balenciaga in his. Vionnet encouraged, taught, and guided the young Balenciaga. Balenciaga did the same for a young Hubert. Balenciaga went on to create his own unique and beautiful designs which still carried the lessons in cut and shape that he learned from Vionnet. Givenchy went on to do the same, carrying with him the lessons that he learned from Balenciaga. All these designers mentioned took inspiration from others, and that is just part of the creative process. I don't see it as a reason to discredit Givenchy for being inspired by Balenciaga, just as I don't see reason to discredit Balenciaga for being inspired by Vionnet. When people say that Givenchy won't be remembered in the history of fashion, I can't help but feel that it simply isn't true. Not only because he created pieces that will always be ingrained in our collective memory, but because there's simply no reason for him not to. Just because one designer is deemed worth remembering, it doesn't mean all others are worth forgetting. Just because Balenciaga was a creative genius, it doesn't mean other designers weren't. Every designer on the scene has added something to the history of fashion. Even if they didn't create a new world-shaking silhouette with one fell swoop, they've still made their contribution. Just because a designer is or isn't internationally heralded as the best, it doesn't mean they can or can't be your personal favourite. It is all completely dependent on the individual. As a personal example, even though he's a popular favourite, Yves Saint Laurent's most famous work is often a little too gaudy for my taste. Part of that may be because the 1980s just don't do it for me in terms of style, but it's still a controversial opinion because his work is legendary. But that's okay. It doesn't mean I need to convince people to forget Yves Saint Laurent and look at other designers instead. I've had fascinating conversations with people who dislike Balenciaga's work and feel it is overrated. And I think this is a good opportunity to say that I personally love it. I think it was so innovative and bold. I marvel at the cuts and the fascinating construction techniques he used. I adore his use of colour and fabric and his minimalistic style. For me, he distilled every creation down to its essence. But despite my love for his work, Givenchy is still my favourite. For me, Givenchy took a similar approach to design, but replaced the slightly severe aspects of Balenciaga's style with little fun and whimsical details. Be it a beautifully made coat which, if you look closely, is also lined with fabric printed to look like fur, or pairing a classic, simple, elegant black dress with a, let's face it, wonderfully ridiculous hat. I love that. To try and boil my argument down to a single example, I will use two specific dresses. In the spring of 1956, both Balenciaga and Givenchy created a dress from the same fabric. This wasn't designed as a test of who could use it best. It was just a popular fabric from that season, and was also used by Jacques Heim and Jacques Griff for their collections. But for the sake of this discussion, when we compare these two designs, we will all see different things to steer our preference. Some may see Balenciaga's artful ruching of the fabric and accenting bows as a masterpiece. I personally prefer Givenchy's focus on clean line and the beautiful silhouette of the Watteau pleated back. But that doesn't warrant me to respond in a way that says Givenchy did it best, that his is the only design that matters, that Balenciaga's is okay but nothing memorable, and we must forget about him and focus on Givenchy instead. Both can be held as examples of fashion from this moment in time, without rank. Both designers have interpreted the same fabric in their own unique way, and there's no method of determining who ultimately did it best, only which is preferred on a person-by-person basis. But perhaps most important of all is that the men themselves never set each other up as competition. They were each other's ally and genuine confidant. Hubert loved and admired Cristóbal and saw him as a mentor. Cristóbal saw Hubert as a designer with huge potential and exciting new ideas, so much so that he shared many of his trade secrets with him, which for a man as private and secretive as Balenciaga was no mean feat. Both designers have left their mark on the world of fashion, for their similarities and their differences. And ultimately, no one person can claim the title of the world's unanimous favourite. But that can't stop them from being your favourite. And that is a wonderful thing.